Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. I'm going to be speaking very briefly and then passing things over to Leila Sarangi for her comments. We're here today to talk about the Canada Recovery Benefit. As you will know, the recovery benefit has been cut. It was cut on July the 17th. From $500 to $300, and in fact, that per week. And in fact, that amount is $270 per week after the taxes have been withheld from the amount. It goes without saying that $270 per week is not nearly enough money for people to live on in many, many parts of this country. It goes without saying that for many people, the pandemic is not over. Their jobs have not come back, or all their hours have not come back. The recovery, which has begun but is still underway, has not been even. We know that the pandemic has particularly hit communities of color, marginalized groups, Indigenous peoples, racialized communities, women, particularly hard, and they have been particularly in need of this recovery benefit. And while we look to a recovery, we know that we are not there yet, and we know that this is an urgent and necessary benefit that many will continue to rely on. In fact, there were almost 750,000 new individuals who were approved for the Canada Recovery Benefit in the period between June 20th and July 3rd. Proving that this is still a necessary benefit that many people in Canada are still eligible for because they still need it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Ms. Sarangi has to say, because this is a pandemic that has a very human face and a very human story. And we can't forget that. We can't forget that every single person deserves the security that was promised to them by all political parties in getting through this pandemic. And every single person in a country as wealthy and as privileged as ours deserves to be able to live in dignity at all times. Alors, ça fait 4 jours que la prestation d'urgence a été coupée par le gouvernement du Canada. La prestation de $500 par semaine a été coupée par 40%. 40% à $300 par semaine, et après les taxes à $270 par semaine. C'est quelque chose de vraiment inquiétant, de vraiment effrayant, parce qu'on sait qu'il y a beaucoup de communautés partout au pays où c'est complètement impossible de vivre sur $270 par semaine. On sait déjà que la pandémie est quelque chose qui a touché les communautés marginalisées, racisées, les peuples autochtones, les femmes, plus que les autres. On sait que ces communautés restent encore désavantagées en ce qui concerne la relance de notre économie. On sait aussi qu'entre la période le 20 juin au 3 juillet, qu'il y a presque 3/4 million de personnes au Canada qui ont été approuvées pour la prestation d'urgence. Alors, c'est clair que la prestation reste importante. C'est clair que c'est une prestation qui reste essentielle pour beaucoup de gens au Canada. Et si la prestation reste essentielle, ça doit être fixé à un niveau qui est survivable, qui est un niveau possible pour assurer les besoins à des personnes dont il y a un besoin pour la prestation. So what we are asking for very clearly is for a return of the full CRB benefit until it is clear that it is no longer needed. And as long as it is needed, it needs to be at a livable amount. It needs to return to the $500 per week. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Leila Sarangi, National Coordinator of Campaign 2000, End Child and Family Poverty. If you could just perhaps walk us through, as I said, what this benefit has meant for people, what it continues to mean for people, and what the cut has meant, that would be great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I am the National Coordinator for Campaign 2000, which is a nonpartisan coalition of over 120 organizations working to end child and family poverty. And together we represent every province and territory in the country. We came about in response to the 1989 all-party federal resolution to end child and family poverty by the year 2000. And each year we monitor and report out on government progress or lack of progress towards meeting that promise. In December, we released our annual report card, which showed some really troubling trends. Progress on ending child poverty had stalled before the pandemic. The national child poverty rate declined by less than half of 1 percentage point, representing less than 20,000 additional children lifted out of poverty between 2017 and 2018. The depth of poverty for every single family type had increased. The depth of poverty for every family type had increased. And when we looked at the distribution of income, those in the lowest income decile had $1,300 less than they had in 1989, the year that promise to end child poverty was made. So this is prior to the pandemic. And it's families, as Ms. Paul had mentioned, who are experiencing systemic discrimination. First Nations, Inuit, Métis, racialized, immigrant, migrant, newcomer, children and families with disabilities, in lone mother-led families, and in other marginalized groups who are disproportionately poor, who are concentrated in low-wage, precarious working conditions, and who have been disproportionately impacted by the economic fallout of the pandemic, and who do not have the supports and the savings in place to stay safe at home. The income benefits that have been provided throughout the pandemic have been crucial to keeping families afloat, particularly the CRB, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, the 3 recovery benefits, and the temporary EI reforms. But not only have these benefits helped to stabilize families, they also act in a very unstable time. They also act as economic stabilizers. This wasn't surplus money that was being tucked away or poured down a drain somewhere. This is money that was being spent locally on necessities in our communities. Those with claims for the Canada Recovery Benefit prior to July 18th, 2021 received $500 a week, taxed at source. So the take home was $450.
Recording in progress.
Economic recovery and employment is not at pre-pandemic levels. We have increased inflation that's affecting the price of food, of housing, of anything we need to buy. It's way more expensive to live right now. We have continued clawbacks of pandemic benefits where suspected pandemic windfalls gains do not exist, and that is with those lowest income earners. We have an environment where promised permanent benefits have not yet been delivered, and that is the 10% increase to the old age security for those 75 years and older, the new disability benefit that won't come until after 3 years of consultation, and affordable childcare to get mothers back to work, that'll come sometime later. We have stalled social assistance rates, no clear EI reform, no true end game for pandemic benefits, and no clarity on the CRB or CRB clawbacks in the future. Campaign 2000 has been advocating for a very long time for government to end poverty with appropriate services and income supports. These income benefits that we've seen delivered through the pandemic are important because they highlight the inadequacy of EI and social assistance programs. And I want to be really clear here. There are barriers to accessing the pandemic benefits. They are not perfect in design. They left out many marginalized, racialized migrant workers and the lowest income earners with rules such as the $5,000 qualifying threshold and requiring a valid social insurance number. And the CRB take home was less than the CERB take home. But this income has made an enormous difference for the precarious low-wage workers who receive them. We've heard many stories from people about the ability to pay rent, to purchase food, to pay for medications, to buy PPE, to support their children, and reduce stress levels. Most surely, this is what we mean when we say build back better. Evidence shows us that the Canada Recovery Benefit is a program that is still in need. As Ms. Paul mentioned, 734,970 individual applicants were approved in the most recent benefit period from June 20th to July 3rd. That's almost 750,000 people still meeting all the qualifying requirements for this benefit. What we actually need right now is to take a step back and look at the full policy ecosystem. We need the patchwork that is currently our income support systems to be addressed in a systemic manner and drive towards bringing all incomes up to the low income measure. We need a CERB repayment amnesty for all low income earners, not just the self-employed. We need well-resourced, accessible public services and the creation of decent work with livable wages, safe environments, and a full Medicare system. These are nonpartisan issues. This is about addressing inequality, justice, and a true intersectional, green, and feminist recovery. People can't eat promises. They can't live in homes they can't afford. They can't send their children to childcare that doesn't exist or work in jobs where there are none. And while we may be fed up and done with COVID, it's not clear that it's done with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And that sets it out so clearly. Maybe we can talk for a second about the knock-on effects. I've heard from many housing advocates and also many housing coalitions that the very groups that you mentioned have been most impacted, that we both mentioned have been most impacted during the pandemic, even with these benefits, had continued and continue to fall further and further into rental arrears. And as we know, there have been more moratoriums to a greater or lesser extent across the country. I'm wondering if you want to maybe just mention something about what the impact of a further reduction in the CRB benefit would mean to these families who already, even with the larger benefit, continue to fall behind.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We know that the moratoriums are lifting across the country. And so as those lift, as the arrears that have added up, landlords will be looking for those arrear payments. And then on the other hand, you have a decline in benefit. The math, it doesn't add up. And so we're looking at evictions and more evictions, and we're still operating in a virtual environment. So individuals, families are going to be evicted in cases on Zoom. It's very, there's no dignity in this, and it really just makes no sense. So we need extended moratoriums in addition to the reversal of the CRB cuts, in addition to a program that actually helps families to be able to pay off those arrears.
Absolutely, and that's something that that housing advocates have called for, and certainly that we support. We need to see the same kind of rental assistance benefit extended to residential tenants that we've seen for commercial tenants for the same reasons. We've just delayed something, and we need to have a solution for that. And the solution certainly is a retroactive benefit that will assist those families, the ones that need the most help. And as you said, still it's not over. The pandemic is not at all over for them, and it won't be for a long time. And so the stories that you're hearing then, I mean, I know that we're receiving them from people who are just terrified about this cut to their benefits. And not to put you on the spot, but just to maybe give a concrete example, if you have it, do you know approximately, I mean, I know for my own riding of Toronto Centre, that is one of the least affordable in the country, that's, you know, the average rent for a 1-bedroom is somewhere between 1,700 and 2,000 a month. But do you know how, if you can give an example of one or more communities where this reduced benefit just simply isn't a livable amount? If there's an example, maybe someone that's been in touch to talk to you about what their concern is.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think the amount, $300 a week, is not very livable in most parts of the country. And we did a lot of work around both the CRB, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, and the clawbacks to that, as well as the Canadian Response Recovery Benefit. One community who we worked closely with and heard stories from are youth who are transitioning out of government care. Many who were encouraged by their service workers to apply for these benefits, and who said that for the, you know, first time where there was no jobs for these young people, for the first time they were able to pay rent and buy food. That's where this money is going, paying rent and buying food. I mean, this is basic, like I said earlier, about dignity, about human dignity. We got a story, somebody reached out to us from the West Coast who was a single mother, has a disability, and is raising 2 children, and is caught in a CRB repayment situation. You know, these benefits, they go to providing for families. They go to those choices, to taking away those hard choices that people have been forced to make. That is, do you pay for a new laptop for your child so they can socialize and learn at home, or are you paying your utilities to keep the lights on, or are you paying rent? These recovery benefits and emergency benefits have helped to reduce the stress around those kinds of impossible situations that we're putting family in. And I want to stress again, this is systemic. These are systemic issues. We can choose. Policy can take those choices away from people and provide people with the resources to be able to stay safe at home. And then that benefits all of us, right? That's the new social contract that we have. And so we need to be supporting, government has to be supporting people to make those choices through ongoing benefits.
Yeah, and that's really an excellent point. You know, I was, when I was walking through the community on the weekend, a senior told me that I don't think that there's a real understanding about the additional costs from the pandemic, you know, that it's become more expensive, not just through inflation, but just, as you said, keeping safe, buying personal protective equipment, having to maybe get a laptop for the first time, or, you know, a tablet so that you can actually connect with the world. Having to get, you know, in some communities, of course, that's a luxury, having the internet. I mean, it's extremely expensive and it's a luxury, but it was one you couldn't do without during this period. And so the costs of living have gone up at the same time that this benefit is going down. And so that's something that absolutely I'll have to be concerned with. And so in terms of the CRB, there are many people who have written, and you might have seen the letter writing campaigns asking for it to be extended as well beyond September. How long would you like to see the CRB in place for? What would be the benchmarks for the CRB staying in place and being phased out?
Yeah, I think, you know, until we see a full economic recovery and like I had mentioned, that patchwork of income supports that we currently have addressed, and the new benefits, permanent benefits in place. We can't take away temporary benefits and have nothing for families and individuals to then turn to. We need to make sure that there's decent work that has livable wages. We need to fix the social assistance rates. I mean, we didn't talk about the unequal treatment of these emergency benefits and recovery benefits for social assistance recipients. We need to make sure first that those permanent measures are in place before we start to take away temporary measures. There needs to be a plan for families. There's no justification for just taking these benefits away and having nothing for families to turn to.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna say it, and it's not going to be any surprise to anyone who is watching this, because the Green Party has been saying this for a very long time. What we need is a guaranteed livable income. And the reason that we believe that we need a guaranteed livable income, and that many poverty advocates believe that we do as well, is exactly because the patchwork has been proven conclusively to leave people behind, to leave people without any supports whatsoever. And we have fiddled and tried every kind of possible combination. And we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, and we see even now, how many people still do not have any supports, how many people still continue to fall through the cracks. And as you said, it's a choice. It's a systemic thing. It's structural. It can be changed. There is a way for every single person to be able to live in dignity and to have the support that they need to do that. And so we do need to think. We always talk about what is the urgent need. The urgent need is to restore the CRB to its full amount. And then what is the medium and long-term goal? And that is to ensure that everyone is covered, that there is a full social safety net for every single person in this country. So I'm going to ask Leila Sarangi if she has some concluding thoughts for us. I mean, this is really about offering a platform for those like you who are closest to these issues and who are serving the communities who will be most impacted by these decisions. So I want to leave the last word to you. Just to say, from my own personal experience, coming from a very low income family, who would have been exactly the kind of family that you've described, the difference of $130 or $230 a month. I hope I'm doing, yes, $230 a month. I hope I was making sure the math was right, is the difference between eating and not eating, or the difference between being able to buy a pass for public transportation to get to work or not. These are really, it's not an exaggeration to say for some people that this is the difference between just making it and not making it at all. And so I hope that is what will be kept in mind. And I know that this is something that is the question for recipients right now. So over to you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for offering me some closing remarks. I really appreciate it. And I think what I will leave with is echoing what you were saying, that, we learn about what doesn't work by talking to people who are in those positions. So, government needs to be going out and talking to communities, listening to those voices, and making policy responses that will then start to close those gaps. That's what I think needs to happen. We need to have the voices of the people who are so disproportionately affected and so far away from decision making, actually a part of shaping, monitoring, and evaluating these policy solutions. That's how we're really going to close these gaps. And we need to put our money where our values are. So we need a budget that then is going to support those policy decisions. And that's how we're going to move the needle on poverty and inequality. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and so incredibly well said. Merci à tout le monde d'être ici avec nous et avec notre invitée Leila Sarangi. J'espère que vous allez continuer à suivre cet enjeu, parce que c'est quelque chose qui touche les personnes ici au Canada en temps réel. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for Leila Sarangi for being with us and for really helping again to give a human face and story to this decision. We hope that it will be reversed. We hope that everyone who feels strongly that it should be will speak up and speak out, write to their MPs, whichever party they belong to, asking them to reverse this decision and asking them to begin to think now about how we are going to make sure that everyone in Canada is better protected in the future, because it is possible, absolutely. Merci beaucoup. Merci à tous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Thank you, Mr. Rangi. This ends the Facebook Live portion of the press conference. Thank you for joining us. Ceci met fin à la partie Facebook Live de la conférence de presse. Merci de nous rejoindre. And now we will begin with questions. One question, one follow-up. Please use the raised hand feature if you wish to ask a question, and please tell us which media organization you are with. Nous allons commencer les questions. Une question, un suivi. Veuillez utiliser la fonction de lever la main si vous voulez poser une question et veuillez identifier votre média. We will begin Alex Balangor from the Toronto Star. One question, one follow-up. Go ahead, please, Alex.
Hi, thanks very much. I guess just shifting to the political situation inside your party, if I can. There's been people calling for more transparency from you about why exactly the threats to your leadership seem to have been paused or dropped at the 11th hour this week. I know you're saying earlier, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? You don't want to leak, you don't want to talk about it, but I'm wondering, given that there's been calls for more transparency, you talked about the importance of giving members clarity about the leadership situation, if you can give us that clarity now about what exactly happened and why these threats were dropped and your leadership is secure for the time being.
Thank you, Alex. I've provided as much clarity and transparency as I can, and you're absolutely right. One of the hallmarks, I hope, of my leadership are exactly those things. So I provided as much as I can. What we do have now is certainty for a while, in any case, that we do really need in order to do two things. First and foremost, get back to speaking about policy issues, which is why I was determined today and in the days moving forward to get the focus back where it belongs, on issues like the cuts to the CRB, on issues like completing our social safety net, and tackling the climate emergency, which we see the impacts of all over the country in this moment. That is one thing. And then the second thing is, we should not be headed into an election. We don't need to be headed into an election, and we have urgent business that is still unfinished to protect people in Canada. But if we are headed into one, then we need to be prepared. We need as many Green voices in Parliament as possible, fighting for progressive policies and fighting for a true strategy to tackle the climate emergency. And so we have that for the moment. I'm going to take that with both hands and try to make sure that I'm doing all I can to get us prepared for that election and to talk about the policies that matter.
Do you have a follow-up?
Just as a follow-up to that, I guess, so you're giving us as much clarity and transparency as you can. What's preventing you from giving us total clarity and transparency?
Well, as I said, I've given as much as I can. If there was any further details that I could provide, I would. The key thing is the outcome, which is that we have a suspension of the non-confidence motions during the life of this current federal council. This federal council term will expire for most of the councillors next month. We know that there will be no further motions introduced, and I know that that is what our members wanted. That's what our candidates needed. That's what the public also wanted to know. And so I'm taking that, and as I said, using it as an opportunity, as a springboard to get back to where my attention should always be, which is on promoting our progressive policies and also on ensuring in this year, which seems like, unfortunately, it may be an election year, that we get as many Greens elected as we can so that they can contribute to that work.
Thank you, Alex. Next question, David Thurton, CBC. Go ahead, David, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Ms. Paul, I just wanted to ask you about a tweet that you issued yesterday. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Wonderful. Good morning again.
Morning.
You said, just speaking about the anti-Semitism summit that's happening today, that government officials and civic Jewish leaders were all invited, but you weren't. And then you went on to say some other things. So I just wondering if you could expand on those comments, that tweet, now that we have you. Was it a mistake to not invite you?
Well, what I would say is that given that this is an emergency national summit on anti-Semitism, one of the topics being anti-Semitism in Canadian politics, the choice by the government and this is not a liberal event, this is not a partisan event, it is a Government of Canada event. The choice of the minister and the prime minister not to invite the only Jewish federal leader to attend, and someone who I pains me to say is a regular target of anti-Semitic attacks, to participate and to share my experience and some of my policy proposals or recommendations, I think is a loss to the conversation. And that really should be the focus. I know that the Jewish community was very keen to make sure that all political parties were involved and participated, because we all had a stake in this. We all had the stake in ensuring that everyone can live comfortably in their identity in Canada. And there has been a spike in hateful ideology, period, and across the board over the last number of years. So I think anytime we don't bring all the best ideas to the table, wherever they come from, that it's a loss for all of us.
You know, there is a view, I don't know if this was shared necessarily by the Liberals, but that you don't want to politicize this event. And, you know, sometimes when political leaders, whether it's yourself or other parties, when they show up, you know, it's especially, you know, in this, I guess we're in an election period, right? It could be an opportunity to grandstand and, you know, to pull rank and do all that kind of stuff. What do you think about that worry that if all the political leaders were involved, it would have been an opportunity to, you know, campaign?
Well, first, I would say that I think it's a very sad state of affairs if we can't come together in a nonpartisan way to talk about anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or anti-Asian hate or anti-Black racism or anti-Indigenous racism. If we're not able to do that, if we're not able to have a truly national conversation and reach a consensus about how we're going to tackle those issues and make sure that everyone in Canada feels safe in their identity, then it really does just reflect what Jody Wilson-Raybould said in her letter when she announced that she wasn't running, which is that there has been a level of hyper-partisanship has entered politics that is toxic and that is counterproductive. For my part, I am one of a kind. I am the first Jewish woman to lead a major federal party in Canada, and I'm only the second Jewish person in the last 45 years. So my perspective matters in this conversation. I am part of the Jewish community. To have it excluded is, again, I believe, a loss for us all. And I think that everyone should feel comfortable knowing that my objective at such an important summit would only be to further our solutions toward combating anti-Semitism. I would never seek to grandstand in a situation like that. And frankly, I don't think any of the other opposition leaders would either.
Thank you very much, David. Does anybody else have a question? I know Alex Ballingall has one more question, but first I'd like to open it to the rest of the media that is here. If somebody else has a question, please raise your hand. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Par le média, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction de lever la main si vous avez une question. We do have to end in about 5 minutes as Ms. Paul has another engagement. Ms. Paul, would you take another question from Mr. Ballingall?
I will, yes.
Go ahead, Alex, please. One question. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much for looping back to me. Appreciate it. I just wanted to Elizabeth May put out a statement on the situation yesterday. I'm sure you saw that, for essentially breaking her silence, I guess. And in that statement, she said that you had asked her not to speak about the situation or speak out during I guess this crisis, or whatever you want to call it, about surrounding your leadership. So I wanted to ask you whether that's true, and if so, whether you still would have welcomed an unequivocal statement of support from the former leader while your leadership was under threat like this.
It was wonderful to see Elizabeth's statement yesterday. Certainly a statement of support and encouragement is always welcome. And I've been grateful to receive so many from across the country and from people who aren't even Green. So it's wonderful to include Elizabeth amongst that today. I think that, as I said, I certainly am seeking to bring a new culture to politics. I didn't enter politics to play the game the way that it has been all of these decades, because it excludes people. And as Jody Wilson-Raybould said in her statement, it is not a welcoming place for many underrepresented and marginalized people. And as we heard today, those voices are important. We want people most impacted by an issue to be the ones making the policy decisions about those issues. And so I am not here to do things in the same way. And if that works, great. If it doesn't, I accept that. And so I encourage all of the people in our party, if they want to speak out, they should, absolutely, but in a way that really helps to elevate politics and political discourse. So I'm very grateful for that statement. I think that it's going to help us, as I said, move on. I want to talk about things like the CRB. I want to talk about the things that I'm hearing on the street. No one, when I go through Toronto Centre, is asking me about this. When I'm in St. Jamestown, they're asking me about seniors' benefits. They're asking me about affordable housing. They're asking me about the cuts to their benefits. So I really need to get back to that important work.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. I just want to check if there might be a question for Ms. Sarangi. Just checking. All right. Well,
I'll invite her back, and there will indeed be questions, because these are really pressing issues. I do most sincerely. I respect and understand the need to ask these questions, but I'm hoping that we can, as I said, put them to bed quickly so that we can get back to the important work.
Thank you, Ms. Paul, and thank you, Ms. Sarangi. This concludes today's press conference. Merci, Madame Paul et Madame Sarangi. Ceci conclut la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Merci à tout le monde pour nous rejoindre.
Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you very much.